I live on the second floor of a 3-story apartment building, which I've come to affectionately call the anxiety sandwich zone. It's that special place where you're hyper aware of your own existence because you're trapped between two other worlds. Every scrape of a chair from below and every thud from above feels like it's happening directly inside your own skull, a private symphony of other people's lives that you never asked to conduct. For the longest time, my primary composer of this symphony was the woman upstairs, and I was convinced she despised my very being. Not for any specific transgression on my part, but with a deep, general animosity that I felt through the floorboards. She moved in during the strange, muffled silence of the pandemic. Our building, once a hub of brief hellos and held open doors, had become a ghost ship of masked figures who scurried from the lobby to their apartments. I never saw her face clearly. She was a blur of motion, always adorned with large, noise-canceling headphones that screamed, "Do not perceive me." Our only real interactions were auditory, and they were aggressive. Or so I thought. There were the constant, inexplicable droppings. Not the gentle clatter of a dropped fork, but heavy, resonant thuds at the most ungodly hours. I'd be drifting off to sleep at 3 a.m., and suddenly a sound like a frozen turkey hitting the floor would jolt me awake. It was like living below, someone who was perpetually losing a game of Jenga in agonizing slow motion. One night, a truly baffling sound occurred. Something rolled, uninterrupted, across her hardwood floor for a solid 30 seconds. A full half-minute of a deep, rumbling roll. My mind raced through the possibilities. A bowling ball? A runaway watermelon? A rogue piece of exercise equipment making a break for it? The mystery was maddening. My own apartment became a sanctuary of silence, mostly out of fear. I was consumed by the idea that I was just as loud to the person below me as she was to me. I started leaving my shoes by the door, padding around in thick socks like a nervous cat. I bought felt pads for the bottoms of my chair legs. I learned to close kitchen cabinets with the delicate precision of a bomb disposal expert. My music, once a vibrant part of my home, was relegated to headphone-only listening. I even found myself feeling a pang of guilt for sneezing too loudly. A truly wild thought when you consider the involuntary nature of a sneeze. Imagine apologizing for a basic human reflex within the confines of your own home. That was my reality. I was shrinking myself, trying to take up less space in the world, all for a faceless neighbor I had cast as the villain in my domestic drama. Then came the night of the incident, the climax of my self-imposed terror. I was getting a glass of water, my mind elsewhere, and in a moment of clumsy carelessness, the full glass slipped from my hand. It didn't just drop. It felt like it exploded. The crash echoed through my small kitchen, a sharp, violent sound in the dead of night. Glass sprayed across the tile in a glittering, destructive wave. My heart hammered against my ribs. This is it, I thought. She's finally going to come down here and unleash the fury I've been dreading for months. I imagined a furious banging on my door, a litany of complaints about my thoughtlessness. I cleaned it up with frantic speed, my hands shaking, half expecting to be interrupted at any moment. But nothing came. The silence from above was absolute, and somehow even more unnerving. The next morning, I approached my front door with trepidation, bracing myself for a passive-aggressive note from the building. "Manager." Instead, I found something else. A single yellow Post-it note was stuck to the wood, slightly crumpled at the corner. The handwriting was neat, loopy, and friendly, like a favorite teacher's. It read, "Hey, hope you're okay?" I heard a crash. "Last night. Just wanted to check in. I drop stuff all the time, too. No judgment. Apt 3C reader. I didn't just melt. I evaporated." The entire elaborate narrative of this headphone-wearing, watermelon-rolling villain I had constructed in my head dissolved in an instant. All the anxiety, the tiptoeing, the resentment, it was all a fiction I'd written myself. This woman wasn't a monster. She was just me, but one floor up. A fellow clumsy human living her life, probably just as oblivious to the stories I was telling myself. Later that week, feeling emboldened and deeply ashamed of my prior assumptions, I baked a batch of banana muffins. They were from a box mix. Let's not get carried away and pretend I'm some kind of culinary hero, but it felt like a necessary peace offering. I placed a small container of them in front of her door with a note of my own. from your equally clumsy neighbor. A few hours later, my phone buzzed with a voice note from an unknown number. She must have gotten it from the building directory. I pressed play, and a warm, slightly sheepish voice filled my ear. "Oh my God, these are amazing! You didn't have to do that. Also, to solve the mystery, I'm pretty sure the rolling sound you heard last week was a cantaloupe that escaped my grocery bag. It's a very long, very embarrassing story. We still haven't met face to face. Our lives remain separated by a few inches of plaster and wood, but now our connection is built on more than just imagined grievances. We trade leftovers, leaving little containers outside each other's doors. We text memes about the trials of working from home. And yes, she still drops things at 3 a.m., but now, when I hear that familiar, resounding thud, I don't cringe. I just pull the covers up, smile into the darkness, and think, same girl, same. My opinion, to me, this story is a perfect encapsulation of modern loneliness and the danger of the narratives we invent. In the absence of real connection, it's so easy to fill in the blanks with our own fears and insecurities, casting strangers in roles they never auditioned for. The protagonist's anxiety is so palpable. The way they shrink themselves to avoid conflict is something I think many of us can relate to. The resolution, a simple post-it note, is so powerful because it's so small. It's a reminder that a tiny act of kindness and vulnerability can completely dismantle a fortress of misunderstanding we've built in our own minds. What do you think? Have you ever completely misjudged a neighbor or a stranger based on a story you told yourself? Share your experience in the comments below. Now, let's move on to our next story. A few months back, I found myself in that all-too-familiar purgatory, waiting outside the fitting rooms at an Ann Taylor while my teenage daughter, deep in the throes of sartorial crisis, tried on an endless parade of clothes. I was leaning against a wall, idly scrolling through my phone, my work lanyard still hanging around my neck and a pen tucked absent-mindedly behind my ear. A rookie mistake I'd soon come to realize. The air was thick with the scent of new clothes and the quiet desperation of Saturday shoppers. A woman emerged from the fitting room next to my daughter's, her shoulders slumped in defeat. She was surrounded by a mountain of rejected garments on the return to rack hook, a testament to her fruitless quest. She let out a frustrated sigh, catching my eye. "I've tried on half the store," she lamented, more to herself than to me. "My husband's company Christmas party is in 2 weeks, and I feel like a potato in everything." She then glanced at my lanyard and the pen, her eyes lighting up with a flicker of hope. "Oh, can you help me find something that actually works?" I'm at my wit's end. My mind raced. I should have corrected her immediately. I should have said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't work here," and returned to my phone. But looking at her, seeing the genuine exhaustion and vulnerability in her expression, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. There was a kindness in her face, a hint of a fun-loving person buried under a layer of stress. I knew that feeling all too well, the feeling of looking in the mirror and not recognizing the person staring back, of wanting so desperately to feel beautiful and confident, if only for one night. So I just smiled, pushed myself off the wall, and said, "Let's do it." For the next 20 minutes, we became a 2-woman mission. I learned her name was Sarah, and she was a high school science teacher who spent her days in comfortable slacks and lab coats. The party was for her husband's law firm, a notoriously stuffy affair, and she felt immense pressure to look the part. "I just don't want to look like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's clothes," she confessed as we sifted through a rack of silk blouses. We talked, we laughed, and I found myself genuinely invested in her success. I pulled colors she normally shied away from and shapes she thought she couldn't wear. She was funny and self-deprecating, and I could see the spark of her personality waiting to be set alight. Finally, I spotted it. A deep emerald green velvet dress with long sleeves and a simple, elegant cut. It was sophisticated but not stuffy, festive but not gaudy. "Just try this one," I urged. "For me." She was hesitant, but she took it into the fitting room. The moments she was gone felt strangely suspenseful. When she stepped out, the transformation was instantaneous. The dress hugged her in all the right places, and the rich color made her eyes sparkle. She wasn't just wearing a dress, she was inhabiting it. Her posture changed. She stood up taller, a slow, genuine smile spreading across her face as she looked at her reflection. She looked absolutely radiant. "Wow," she breathed, turning to see herself from all angles. I actually love this." Beaming at her reflection, she turned to me. "You are a miracle worker. How long have you worked here?" I finally let out the laugh I'd been holding back. "Oh, I don't work here," I admitted, gesturing to my moody teenager finally emerging from her own fitting room. "I'm just waiting on my daughter." We both burst out laughing, a shared moment of absurdity and relief. She gave me the biggest, most heartfelt hug, thanking me profusely. "This was the most fun I've had shopping in years," she said. I figured that was a lovely, fleeting moment of human connection, and that would be the end of it. Until last week. I was at a local bakery trying to coax my laptop to connect to the spotty Wi-Fi when I felt a gentle tap on my shoulder. I turned, and there she was. It took me a second to place her outside the context of Ann Taylor, but then her bright smile clicked everything into place. She was glowing. "I knew it was you," she exclaimed. "You helped me find that dress. I've been hoping I'd run into you again. I wanted to say thank you properly." She bought my coffee, and we ended up sitting and talking for nearly an hour. She told me she wore the dress to the party and felt like a queen. She hadn't just felt confident, she'd reconnected with a part of herself she thought she'd lost. That one night, she said, had been a catalyst. It reminded her that she wasn't just a teacher, a wife, or a mom. She was Sarah. The experience sparked her to start putting herself out there again in all sorts of ways. She'd since joined a local choir and started volunteering at a women's shelter, something she'd always wanted to do. She was effervescent, bubbling with a newfound energy that was truly beautiful to witness. It's funny, isn't it? How a small, seemingly insignificant moment, 20 minutes of playing dress-up with a stranger in a department store, can ripple outwards in ways you could never possibly expect. I'm so glad our paths crossed again. Some people, and some moments, really do stay with you. My opinion, this story gets me every time. It's a powerful testament to the idea that we all have the capacity to make a significant impact on each other's lives, even in the most mundane of circumstances. The protagonist didn't have any special skills. She just offered her time and a bit of kindness. What she did was see the other woman not as a problem to be solved, but as a person who needed to feel seen. The story isn't really about the dress. It's about what the dress represented: confidence, self-worth, and the courage to step back into your own light. It's a beautiful reminder of the quiet power of empathy. What's your take? Can a small act of kindness truly be a catalyst for major life changes? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. All right, let's dive into our next story. My life as a digital freeloader began with the most exquisite timing. I was in the middle of a high-stakes Zoom meeting, presenting my meticulously prepared quarterly reports to the entire leadership team. My boss was there, his boss was there. Basically, everyone who could fire me was on that call. I was just getting to the slide on projected revenue growth when my screen froze. The faces of my colleagues blurred into a pixelated nightmare, and the dreaded spinning wheel of death appeared, mocking my ambition. A hot, prickling wave of panic washed over me. This was it. This was how my career ended. In a frenzy, I clicked on the Wi-Fi icon on my laptop, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. A list of nearby networks appeared, a jumble of default router names and cryptic codes. And then, I saw it. A beacon of hope in the digital darkness. Pretty fly for a Wi-Fi. And next to it, the most beautiful sight a desperate man can behold. No, little lock symbol. It was an open network. Without a second thought, I clicked. It connected instantly. My screen flickered back to life, the faces of my bosses reappearing, none the wiser. I finished my presentation, my voice only trembling slightly, and managed to escape the meeting with my job intact. I made a mental note to call my internet provider that afternoon, but life got in the way. I forgot. And then, a funny thing happened. The next morning, my laptop automatically connected to Pretty Fly for a Wi-Fi again. I noticed something remarkable. It was fast. Blazingly fast. YouTube videos didn't just start, they exploded onto the screen. There was no buffering wheel. That infuriating symbol of my old connection's inadequacy, It was like I'd been driving a beat-up sedan my whole life and had just been handed the keys to a sports car. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks bled into months. My guilt quickly morphed into a comfortable, symbiotic routine. I'd wake up, my laptop would greet its familiar punny network, and I'd smile. I started to build a persona for my anonymous benefactor. They had to be a chill Gen Xer, someone with a great taste in 90s music and probably a closet full of flannel. They were cool, they were generous, and they were my silent partner in productivity. Stealing their Wi-Fi became a small, secret joy in my life. This comfortable delusion lasted for a glorious 6 months. Then, last week, my world tilted on its axis. I was at the local coffee shop waiting for my latte, and I glanced at my phone's Wi-Fi list out of habit. Pretty Fly for a Wi-Fi was gone. A pang of genuine loss hit me. Had they moved? Had they finally wised up and secured their network? But then I saw it. A new network name sitting right at the top of the list with a full-strength signal. Oh, hi, Coffee Cat 99. I nearly dropped my phone. I felt the blood drain from my face. Coffee Cat 99. That wasn't just some random name. It was my name, my username, for a handful of online gaming forums, a relic from my college days that I still used out of habit. My stomach did a complicated, sickening flip. How? How could they possibly know? My mind, which knows next to nothing about the inner workings of the internet, spun into a paranoid spiral. Can Wi-Fi track who you are? Can they see your screen? Oh God, have they seen the embarrassing number of hours I've spent watching videos of historical sword fighting? Do they know which specific apartment the signal has been beaming into for the last 180 days? The exposure felt immense, terrifying. But the worst part, the part that truly scrambled my brain, was the name itself. Oh hi, Coffee Cat 99. It wasn't accusatory, it wasn't stop stealing my internet or get your own damn Wi-Fi. It was a greeting. Oh hi, offered specifically to me. This meant they knew, and they were okay with it. It was a gesture of immense chill, but it was also a confirmation that they had been watching me in some digital sense. They knew my secret identity. I felt like I was in a spy movie, only the stakes were incredibly low and deeply personal. I had no idea which neighbor it could be. The signal was strong enough that it could be coming from the apartment next to me, above me, or even across the hall. Every neighbor I passed in the hallway became a suspect. Was it the quiet old lady in 3B? The group of college kids in 3D? I called my internet company that very day, my voice filled with a newfound urgency. It turned out my service had never been canceled. A wire had been damaged during some building maintenance, and they had simply forgotten to schedule a fix. It's working now, my own private, mediocre speed connection. But every single time I open my laptop, I see it. Oh hi, Coffee Cat 99 is still there on the network list, an open, welcoming, and deeply unsettling invitation. Yesterday, I bought a bag of expensive, locally roasted coffee beans. I divided them into small bags and left one outside every single door on my floor, each with a sticky note that read, "From a grateful neighbor." If they figured out I'm Coffee Cat 99, they'll probably figure out the coffee is from me. If not, well, at least everyone on my floor gets free delicious coffee. I still have absolutely no idea how they knew. Part of me wants to Google it to understand the technology behind my unmasking, but honestly, they could have put a password on their network at any point in those 6 months. They didn't. And that act of quiet, mysterious generosity is something I'm not sure I want to demystify. My opinion. This story is a brilliant comedy of manners for the digital age. It perfectly captures that blend of guilt and rationalization that comes with any minor transgression. But what makes it so special is the twist. The reveal isn't a confrontation. It's a quiet, witty acknowledgement. It transforms the story from one about petty theft into one about an incredibly strange and specific form of human connection. The paranoia the protagonist feels is so real, that modern-day fear of being digitally exposed. But the neighbor's response is the opposite of what we'd expect. It's not anger, it's a playful, gentle, "I see you." It's a hilarious and oddly heartwarming tale about the invisible threads that connect us in our hyper-connected, yet often anonymous world. What would you do in this situation? Would you fess up, or would you just move to a new city and change your name? Let me know in the comments. And now, for our next story, one from my own life. I used to work in a bookstore, and if you want a PhD in the human condition, I suggest working retail during the holiday season. You see people at their best, but more often, you see them at their absolute worst, frayed, frantic, and armed with a list of demands. This particular story happened on a chaotic Tuesday a week before Christmas. The store was a swirling vortex of tinsel, stressed-out shoppers, and the faint, tinny sound of a Michael Bublé album on its 14th rotation. I was tired, my feet ached, and my smile felt like it was painted on. That's when he came to my counter. He was an older man, probably in his late 60s, with a grim, set jaw and eyes that seemed to be looking for a fight. He slapped a thin, brightly illustrated children's book down on the counter between us. It was called The Girl and the Star. "I need to return this," he said, his voice a low growl. I went into my retail autopilot. "Of course, sir. Do you have the receipt?" "No," he snapped, as if the question itself was a personal insult. "I don't have the receipt. Just return it." I took a deep breath, clutching my customer service smile like a shield. "I understand, sir, but our store policy requires a receipt for all cash or credit card refunds. Without it, the best I can offer you is store credit for the current selling price." I pointed to the small, laminated sign taped to the counter that explained this very policy, a sign I had pointed to 100 times that day. His face darkened. "That's ridiculous. I bought it here 2 days ago. It's in perfect condition. You can just put it back on the shelf and sell it again. What's the problem?" "The problem, sir, is the policy," I said, my patience starting to fray. "I can't override it. It's programmed into the system." He leaned in, his voice dropping to an intimidating whisper. "I want to speak to your manager. You're being deliberately unhelpful. Is this how you treat all your customers? People like you are what's wrong with this country." The personal attack stung. All my exhaustion and frustration from the day coalesced into a hard knot of anger in my chest. I was about to fire back a sarcastic retort, to call my manager and let her deal with this miserable, entitled man. But then, for some reason, I looked down at the book. The Girl and the Star. The cover showed a little girl with pigtails looking up at a night sky. It was a sweet, simple picture book about love and loss and finding light in the darkness. It seemed so at odds with the rage radiating from the man in front of me. Something stopped me. Instead of getting my manager, I looked back at him. Really, looked at him for the first time. I saw past the anger. I saw the deep, dark circles under his eyes. I saw the slight tremor in his hands. He didn't just look angry. He looked broken. I made a split-second decision. I changed my tone, softening my voice. "It's a beautiful book," I said quietly. He blinked, taken aback. The sudden shift in tone had thrown him off his rhythm of fury. "What?" "The book," I repeated, gesturing to it. "It's a really lovely story. Did you buy it for someone special?" The question hung in the air between us. The man's entire demeanor changed. The hard lines of his face seemed to crumble. His shoulders slumped. He stared at the book, and his eyes filled with a terrifying amount of pain. A single tear tracked its way down his weathered cheek. "It was for my granddaughter," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Her name was Lily. She loved stories about the stars." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "She passed away on Saturday. Brain tumor. She was 7. The air left my lungs. The entire noisy, chaotic bookstore seemed to fade into a muffled silence. The Michael Bublé, the frantic shoppers, my own petty frustrations. It all vanished. All that existed was this man and his devastating, incomprehensible grief. He wasn't angry at me or the store policy. He was angry at the universe. And this book, this simple, beautiful book he had bought with hope and love, was now an unbearable monument to his loss. He just couldn't stand to have it in his house. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, swiped my employee card through the register, and hit the override button. I opened the cash drawer and counted out the full price of the book into his hand. "I'm so very sorry for your loss," I said, my voice thick with emotion. He looked at the money in his hand, then back at me, his eyes filled with a dawning, confused gratitude. He couldn't speak. He just nodded, turned, and walked out of the store, disappearing back into the holiday crowd. I never saw him again. I got a minor talking to from my manager later for breaking policy, but I didn't care. It was the best and most important thing I did that entire holiday season. My opinion. This experience has stayed with me for years. It was a raw, brutal lesson in a simple truth. You never, ever know what battle someone is fighting. It's so easy to see anger and react with anger. It's our default setting. We see a rude customer, a bad driver, a short-tempered stranger, and we label them as a jerk. But behind that surface-level emotion can be a universe of pain we can't possibly comprehend. That moment taught me that empathy isn't a passive feeling. It's an active choice. It's the choice to pause, to look deeper, and to choose kindness, even when it's not deserved or required. It's about recognizing the shared, fragile humanity in all of us. Has a stranger's unexpected vulnerability ever completely changed your perspective on a situation? I'd be honored to hear your story in the comments. Let's move on to the next story. About a year ago, during a period where I felt particularly adrift in my own life, I started taking my lunch breaks in a small, slightly neglected park a few blocks from my office. It was my escape from the sterile hum of the office fluorescent lights. One afternoon, as I was getting up from my usual bench, I noticed something tucked between the slats. It was a small, handsome journal, bound in soft, worn, dark green leather. It was completely unmarked, with no name or identifying information on the outside. My first instinct, the good citizen instinct, was to take it to the park's lost and found. But a stronger, more curious instinct took over. The journal felt old, personal. I sat back down on the bench, the journal feeling heavy and full of secrets in my hands. I told myself I wouldn't open it. It felt like a profound violation of privacy. But I was in a strange place in my life, feeling disconnected and invisible, and the thought of getting a glimpse into someone else's world was a siren song I couldn't resist. Just one page, I promised myself. With a sense of trepidation, I opened it to a random page in the middle. The handwriting was elegant but shaky, the cursive of someone from a much older generation. The entry was dated just a few weeks prior. October 12th, it began. The dahlias are refusing to give up, even with the chill in the air. They are such stubborn, beautiful things. They remind me of him. Robert always said that stubbornness was a virtue, as long as it was in the service of something beautiful. I miss the way he used to say that. The silence in the garden is so loud some days. My heart sank. This wasn't a collection of juicy secrets or dramatic confessions. This was the quiet, intimate record of a life. I felt a hot flush of shame for my intrusion, but I couldn't stop. I turned another page. October 15th. I went to the market today. The young man at the counter called me dear. I know he meant to be kind, but it made me feel 1,000 years old. It is a strange thing to become invisible while you are still here. To feel like you are a ghost in your own life, a collection of memories that no one else can see. I read on for nearly an hour, completely engrossed. I learned about her late husband, Robert, and their 60-year love story. I read about her frustration with a leaky faucet, her joy at seeing a rare cardinal at her bird feeder, and her deep, profound fear of forgetting the little details of her life. Her name was Eleanor, and through her words, she became achingly real to me. She wasn't a ghost. She was a vibrant, feeling, thinking person who was afraid the world had stopped seeing her. I felt an intense, almost painful connection to her. My own feelings of being adrift paled in comparison to her quiet, dignified struggle with loneliness and age. I knew I couldn't just leave the journal at a lost and found, where it might be thrown away after a few weeks. It felt too important. I flipped to the very first page, and there, in the same shaky cursive, was an inscription. Eleanor Vance, 124, Willow Creek Lane. It was an address, and a quick search on my phone showed it was only a few miles away, in an older, more established part of town. The next day, I drove to Willow Creek Lane, the journal sitting on the passenger seat like a sacred object. My heart was pounding. What was I going to say? Hi, I found your diary and read all your most private thoughts. I walked up the stone path of a charming little house with a garden full of defiant late-season dahlias. I rang the bell. The door was opened by a small, frail woman with kind, watery blue eyes and the same elegant features I had imagined. It was Eleanor. "Hello?" she said, her voice soft. I held out the journal. I think this might be yours," I stammered. "I found it in West Haven Park." Her face, which had been a mask of polite curiosity, completely transformed. A wave of immense, profound relief washed over her features. She took the journal, clutching it to her chest like a lost child. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh, thank you. I thought it was gone forever. I was devastated." "It's a beautiful journal," I said, a weak attempt to explain my actions. "The way you write about your garden and your husband." She looked at me, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. She knew I had read it, but there was no anger, no judgment, only a shared, quiet moment of human connection. "He was a good man," she said simply. "Thank you for bringing it back to me." "Thank you." I left her standing on her porch, her journal held tight in her hands. Driving away, I didn't feel like a ghost anymore. By finding and returning a small piece of Eleanor's life, I felt like I had found a small piece of my own. My opinion is Tias Masbi. Story for me is about the sanctity of a life. In our fast-paced world, it's easy to overlook the quiet, internal lives of others, especially the elderly. We see them, but we don't always see them. The protagonist's act of reading the diary starts as a violation, but transforms into an act of profound empathy. They don't just return an object, they return a person's history, their legacy, their soul. It's a powerful story about the moral, complexities of privacy, and the deep, fundamental human need to be remembered and understood. It reminds us that every single person contains a library of stories, joys, and sorrows. What would you have done with the journal? Would you have read it? Would you have tried to return it? I'm fascinated to hear your perspective in the comments. And now, for our final story. For 3 years, my daily commute was a study in gray monotony. The same crowded 7:45 a.m. bus, the same perpetually damp and dreary bus stop, the same sense of dread about the 8 hours I was about to spend in a cubicle under fluorescent lights. The commute was the bookend to a day I rarely enjoyed, a necessary evil. But within this bleak routine, there was one small, consistent point of light. The Pigeon Man. He was there every single morning, without fail. An elderly man, always dressed. In a neat, if a little worn, tweed coat, no matter the season. He would arrive about 5 minutes before me, and by the time I got there, his ritual would already be underway. He would take a small, crumpled brown paper bag from his coat pocket and begin to feed the city pigeons. But he didn't just toss a handful of crumbs and let them fight over it. It was a delicate, deliberate, and strangely beautiful process. He seemed to know them. He would murmur to them in a low, gentle voice, scattering seeds in specific spots, ensuring the smaller, more timid birds got their share. There was a particular pigeon with a mangled foot he always saved a special pile for, right by his own worn leather shoes. The birds, normally skittish and chaotic, were calm around him. They trusted him. They would flutter down and eat peacefully, a small temporary community of tranquility in the middle of the urban chaos. He and I never spoke. Not once in 3 years. We were silent cohabitants of that little concrete island. In the beginning, I admit, I found him a bit strange, another one of the city's eccentrics, but as the months wore on, my perception shifted. His quiet, dignified ritual became an anchor in my day. In a life that felt increasingly frantic and meaningless, his simple, selfless act of kindness was a daily reminder of something real and good. It was a constant. I started to look forward to it, this silent, shared moment. It was a 5-minute masterclass in patience and gentleness that I would carry with me into my sterile office. I started noticing the little things. The way he would smile faintly when the pigeon with the bad foot finally got its fill. The care with which he would fold the empty paper bag and place it back in his pocket. He was creating a tiny pocket of grace in a graceless place, and he asked for nothing in return. Then, one Monday morning, he wasn't there. I told myself he was probably just sick, Or maybe he'd missed his bus. But he wasn't there on Tuesday either. Or Wednesday. The pigeons were there, but they were different. They were agitated, skittering around nervously, their usual peaceful breakfast replaced by a chaotic scramble for any dropped crumb. The bus stop felt profoundly empty. The gray, concrete suddenly looking bleaker than ever before. A surprising and potent sense of loss settled over me. How could I miss someone I had never even spoken to? A full week went by. Then, 2. I had come to accept that he was gone, that this small, bright spot in my routine had been extinguished. I felt a genuine grief for this stranger whose name I never knew. Then, on a crisp autumn morning nearly a month after he had disappeared, I saw him. He was walking slowly toward the bus stop, looking noticeably frailer. His tweed coat seemed a little too big for him now, but in his hand, he clutched a small, crumpled brown paper bag. An overwhelming wave of relief washed over me, so powerful, it almost buckled my knees. He made his way to his usual spot and began his ritual. The pigeons, as if sensing his return, flocked to him immediately. He murmured to them, scattering the seeds with his gentle, deliberate care. He must have felt me staring. He looked up, and for the first time in 3 years, our eyes met. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. But I smiled. A genuine, heartfelt, relieved smile. And he, this quiet, dignified man, looked right at me and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. And then a faint, kind smile touched his own lips. No words were exchanged. None were needed. In that shared glance, a universe of understanding passed between us. I see you. I'm glad you're here. The connection was unspoken, but it was as real and as solid as the pavement beneath our feet. He was a part of my story, and I, the silent observer, was a small part of his. My opinion, this story is incredibly dear to me because it's about the profound relationships we can form in the margins of our lives. It's not about grand gestures or dramatic conversations. It's about the quiet, consistent presence of another human being. The protagonist and the pigeon man built a relationship based on shared space and silent observation. The man's daily ritual was a form of communication, a broadcast of kindness that the protagonist unknowingly tuned into every day. The grief felt in his absence is a testament to how deeply we can become connected to the small, stable anchors